Okay. Hello, everyone. Today is Wednesday, February 14th, 2024. My name is Darlene L. I am a recovered Al-Anon, and I will be leading this meeting this evening. We do want to welcome everyone to our Al-Anon Big Book Recovery meeting. This is a step speaker meeting that meets every Wednesday night at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, which is 8:30 p.m. Eastern. We will study the 12 steps by using the precise instructions out of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous as they relate to us as Al-Anon. So let's go ahead and get our meeting started. Just a quick reminder, we will be studying the steps. If you have a copy of your Big Book, now would be a good time to grab it, or as I'm here reading the preamble. If you don't have a physical copy, there is a PDF version that is very easily accessible online, just aa.org/thebigbook, and it will take you right to a PDF version. You also are welcome to just listen in if you don't have a copy handy. So this is the original AA preamble written by the AA Grapevine describing the fellowship in 1940. We study the preamble with an open mind and an open heart to consider how it applies to Al-Anon. This helps us to stay focused on the message of recovery the pioneers intended while observing the traditions in action. Through the actions taken based on the instructions of the basic text, we comprehend what the pioneers meant when they described the membership of AA, which is that they worked a program of recovery and they no longer drank. In our case, we no longer obsessed over the alcoholic. Through continuous action and study of these principles, the understanding of the value of the original preamble reveals itself. We ask for your humble consideration of our sincere admiration of the pioneers of Alcoholics Anonymous. The simple hope is that we of Al-Anon will grow into the same clarity and unity that birthed the original 12-step fellowship, because without them, after all, none of us would be here. So the original AA preamble. We are gathered here because we are faced with the fact that we are powerless over alcohol and unable to do anything about it without the help of a power greater than ourselves. We feel that each person's religious views, if any, are his own affair. The simple purpose of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is to show what may be done to enlist the aid of a power greater than ourselves, regardless of what our individual conception of that power may be. In order to form a habit of depending upon and referring all we do to that power, we must at first apply ourselves with some diligence. By often repeating these acts, they become habitual, and the help rendered becomes natural to us. We have come to know that, as alcoholics, we suffer from a serious disease for which medicine has no cure. Our condition may be the result of an allergy, which makes us different from other people. It has never been permanently cured by any treatment with which we are familiar. The only relief we have to offer is absolute abstinence, the second meaning of AA. There are no dues or fees. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. Each member squares his debt by helping others to recover. An Alcoholics Anonymous member is an alcoholic who, through the application of and adherence to the AA program, has forsworn the use of any and all alcoholic beverages in any form. The moment he takes so much as one drop of beer, wine, spirits, or any other liquid containing alcohol, he automatically loses all status as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. AA is not interested in sobering up drunks who are not sincere in their desire to stay sober for all time. Not being reformers, we offer our experience only to those who want it. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree and on which we can join in harmonious action. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our program. Those who do not recover are people who will not or simply cannot give themselves to this simple program. Now, you may like our program or you may not, but the simple fact remains that it works, and we believe is our only chance to recover. There is a vast amount of fun included in the AA fellowship. Some people might be shocked at our seeming worldliness and levity, but just underneath there lies a deadly earnestness and a full recognition that we must put first things first, and with each of us, the first thing is the solution to our alcoholic problem. The drink is to die. Faith must work 24 hours a day in and through us, or we perish. In order to set the tone for this meeting, I ask that we bow our heads in a few moments of silent prayer and meditation, followed by the Serenity Prayer. Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thy will, not mine, be done. I wish to remind you that whatever is said at this meeting expresses our own individual opinion as of today and as of up to this moment. We do not speak for AA as a whole, and you are free to agree or disagree as you see fit. In fact, it is suggested that you pay no attention to anything which might not be reconciled with what is in the AA Big Book. If you don't have a Big Book, it is time you got one. Read it, study it, live with it, follow the directions in it, and learn what it means to be an AA. End of preamble. So real quickly here before we get started, a sponsor is anyone who has had a psychic change as a result of working the steps and has the willingness to work with others. For those looking for a sponsor to guide them through the steps, please stay tuned and have your pens ready to record phone numbers immediately after the meeting. Each Al-Anon group ought to be a spiritual entity having but one primary purpose, that of carrying the message to the Al-Anon who still suffers. This is our primary spiritual aim. Our job as a group is to provide people with a place to learn about and work the steps. It has been our experience that working the steps consistently provides us with a better, saner life. We consider all else to be an outside issue. This includes personal problems. The proper venue for sharing such problems is with a sponsor. This is, after all, where real recovery takes place, in working the steps with a sponsor. And we will have sponsors announcing at the end, so hang tight if you're looking for a sponsor. We are just so glad that we are all here, and we are all here because we are not all there. And again, there will be a period of fellowship after the meeting, so if you have questions, if you need a sponsor, if you need to check in or get current, or if you want to discuss other literature, please stick around for the fellowship at the end. That would be a better time for these subjects. And so we are going to get started on the steps that we're covering this evening, which are steps 4, 5, and 6, as we're on the second Wednesday of the month here. And I'm going to just do a quick recap of steps 1 through 3 so that we sort of stay in order here. And I won't go into each of them in detail. That recording is available to listen back to if you missed it last week. But step 1 is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. So that's super important to have that realization before we can move forward to step 2. Most of us realize that once we find ourselves in Al-Anon, right? That we've tried everything under the sun and simply could not win, essentially, that we were absolutely powerless. And at that point, our lives have become unmanageable. Typically, if we're not at that point, we're not really ready to move forward, and it really is, kind of referred to as rock bottom, a point of desperation, point of no return, all these, things you can say. But that's step 1, kind of in summary. Step 2 is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves would restore us to sanity. And sorry, just a quick note, the steps are on page 59 of the big book if you are following along and wanted to read the steps as I go through them. So again, step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So again, once we can admit that we are powerless over alcohol and that our lives are unmanageable, we have to ask ourselves, okay, well, how did we get to this point? What have we tried? And it literally is everything under the sun that's a human aid solution, usually. Sometimes we might find that we have sort of tapped into some sort of spiritual power, or, but what was mentioned before is that it's not consistent. Maybe it's like some sort of hypnosis or a, spiritual meditation or some sort of retreat where you go for a weekend or a week or a month. I don't know the longest average of those types of things, but yeah, what it is that we don't stay consistent in learning to turn our lives over to a higher power on a daily, consistent basis. So, believing that there is a power greater than ourselves and that they can restore us to sanity, that has to, that's step 2, has to come next, because unless we're done with human aid, and we're ready to do something different that we've never done before, which is work the 12 steps, which is a spiritual program of action, and we can't really, we won't find recovery. So moving on to step 3 is made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. So it's one thing to find ourselves here. It's another to have a belief that, yes, a higher power, could fix this for us, permanently. But to actually make the decision to move forward and do that and say, I'm ready. I'm done with that old way of life and I'm ready for something new. The actual decision piece is what comes in step 3. Again, if we're not ready, if we think we still have better ideas, we are certainly free to go and figure that all out. Because again, unless we're kind of all in, we won't find success. We won't find that recovery. It just doesn't work that way. So let's move on to 4 through 6 tonight. Moving on to step 4, which reads, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Okay, so this is where the action comes in, right? This is a spiritual program of action, as I mentioned before, and we literally are going to take pen to paper and make as it said, searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves, which is absolutely very likely something most of us have never honestly done. As we learn about ourselves in the big book, it's really hard for us, especially as Al-Anon, to even imagine for a moment that we are anything but loving and caring and helpful, and not that we aren't those things in certain areas of our lives, perhaps. It's that we don't know how and when to be that and be those things. And so, we're like moral inventory, like, oh, I'm a great person. All I do is care about my loved one. I want what's best for them. And that might all be true on the surface level, but when we actually take pen to paper and sit down and go through the actual motions of, and again, we have to be ready to be honest and see things in a different perspective, we're in for a pretty big awakening. And so on page 62, I'm going to read a bit here. The first full paragraph, it reads, selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. Driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some time in the past, we have made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. Wow. Right? When we read that, again, it's time for that new lens, this new perspective on our troubles, right? I think it is important to highlight sometimes others hurt us, right? That's all true. That's why I'm going to just kind of throw this in before I get to step 5. We work closely with a sponsor because there is a lot of truth into our reality and our past and the things that may have happened to us. Not saying that we are always in the wrong. There are many things that happen to us throughout our lifetime that aren't our fault, that maybe should never have happened by, I don't know, moral and society standards. Maybe we're children who are neglected or what have you. Again, I mentioned this last week. We come from so many different backgrounds and our stories are all very unique. So not to say that, we are never or that we're always in the wrong. Other people will hurt us. That's life, right? And I don't mean to say that nonchalantly. Some of the things that happen to us are very terrible. But what happens is we are usually out of those situations to a certain extent. We're adults, most of us. Yeah, we've grown up. And we literally have the power to have this new way of thinking. And what we've done is continue to live in sort of that, even if we were wronged, kind of that victim mentality, right? Like that mindset where if only they did this or if they only treated me better, what we're going to learn is that we cannot control other people. We cannot make them change. And so we have to learn to have a new perspective on life and on the people we love. And we'll get to that because, again, there are times where we are actually wronged. So there are specific instructions in the book to also cover that. But the many times that we were, now that we're out of these terrible situations where we have the power to no longer be in that mindset where, we're the victim or we're, hurt, we really do make a lot of decisions out of our own defects of character. That's what creeps in, as it was mentioned, fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity. And what we do is we try to play that actor role or play we're the actor in our life, the role of the actor, but we try to play all those other parts. And unless we can learn to turn direction and everything, all the other jobs over to God, truly our higher power, then, we stay in chaos until we decide we're done. So I'll keep reading here. It reads, I'm actually on page 63 now. So this is the action part. It says, next, this is at the bottom here of page 63. Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action. The first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. Okay, so for us as Al-Anons, the only thing we're going to change here is our liquor was but a symptom. For us, it's the desire it's the inability to not leave things alone, to not leave people alone, to not leave our alcoholic loved one alone, to want to manage and control them. That was the symptom of that was our solution, right? Like to our own problems, we thought we could manage and make things better. And again, if only they would do this, if only our loved one would act this way, if only they would be here, if only they would be there, if they would stop drinking, if only they love me, all these things, right? That inability to leave them alone is what keeps us sick, truly. And so again, it says we have to get down to causes and conditions. So this is why we literally put pen to paper. We fill out these inventory sheets rather quickly. I remember, I'm going to sprinkle in my own personal experience because since this is only a 4-week month, I don't get to share my full story. So I'll sprinkle in my personal experience here and there as we go through the steps. And I do recall, getting the email from my sponsor with the directions are in the book, but they have kind of a even more broken down version because, again, this is not something that we've ever done before. We need a lot of guidance. And I remember just opening it up and being like, wow, I actually have to print this and write down things and think about things. And, it's actually very simple. It's a very simple process, but definitely not easy. So many things had to come up that I had not thought about before or that I hadn't thought about recently. And so it was a very unique experience. I had never in any of the years that I had tried to fix things on my own, done something like this. Even self-help workbooks were not from this point of view or perspective. And it was very humbling, very nerve-wracking at times, but I remembered that I had taken step 3 and made that decision, right? The very previous step prior to step 4, that this is what I was ready to do. And I had the willingness to try it. And so I continued on. And so, there's a good example here on page 64. It reads, a business, right, that takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unusable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. That's a pretty big statement, right? And it's great to put this in an analogy form, as they do many times throughout the book, right? So again, we're looking at this with a different lens, and sometimes we need a little help. So this analogy is perfect. If the owner of a business is to be successful, you cannot lie and cheat about the facts, right? And so if you're new and you are lucky and blessed enough to get to step 4 and 5 and through the steps and on, you'll hear your sponsor say, we're just looking at the facts. Facts don't lie. Feelings are not facts, right? So we literally just have to read things in black and white as they are, and again, be willing to have a new perspective on our path, essentially. And so the next last paragraph here on page 64 reads, resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. We asked ourselves, why were we angry? In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burned up. Okay, so the big book gives precise instructions on how to, do this inventory. And again, you'll get help from your sponsor, and which was, it's very needed. And there are, essentially 3 main components. We have resentments, fears, and our sex conduct. So the first here that they're talking about is resentment. And As it says, it's the number one offender. It's what destroys us more than anything. And again, these may be justified feelings to a certain degree, and some of them are really not. And we can see it both ways. We have to have that willingness to hear the perspective and have help from our sponsor to see things for what they really are. So on page 66, it reads, "It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. But with the alcoholic, in our case the Al-Anon, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal. But when harboring such feelings, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the spirit. The insanity of our Al-Anonism, essentially alcohol returns and we drink again. And with us, to drink is to die. If we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be dubious luxury of normal men, but for alcoholics, these things are poison." So again, we have to be willing to see things from a different perspective and learn to live differently. I don't want to keep repeating myself because, again, some of these things may have been justified, but we learn essentially what they teach us. This is what we're going to do when we're wronged because we, again, as I said earlier, we will be wrong. We'll continue to be wronged. And so that's helpful in knowing, too. Not only can we learn to deal with resentment from the past, we learn what are we going to do when we're wronged moving forward. And so we're about to move on to the fear inventory, and I'll just note that within the book there is the sick man's prayer, which I still use, daily probably now in recovery. So again, we learn to live, forget the past, and kind of learn to have tools to live in the future. Okay, so on page 67, they start to talk about the fear. So again, I mentioned before, there's a inventory sheet for fears. It reads, "Notice," this is the bottom paragraph, "the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. The short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classified with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble." So it goes on to read, we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper even though we had no resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. So I'm going to read one last part about fear here. Actually, let me just comment. Much like the resentment, some of our fears, may sound justified, especially to us. And truly, what we're learning is that if we sincerely took step 3 and decided, like, hey, I'm no longer in control, and like I can recognize and accept that God is, we made that decision when we took step 3, and we can apply that to our fears moving forward. So anything that brings us fear, we learn, God handled it. Truly, it's like that simple. I'll kind of reiterate what it says here, that it sets emotion and train It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune and we felt we didn't deserve. And then it reads, but did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? So often, and again, as a reminder, what we learned when we studied the doctor's opinion is that, we have this defective mind, right? Like we tend to almost very often, and not always, but overthink and overfear certain situations. And even if it is semi-justified, if we truly, truly trust that God is in control of everything, we have nothing to fear. And if we learn to walk with God hand in hand, we have nothing to fear because we're going to trust Him with each next right action, which is described later in the steps. We are continuously and forever, constantly and forevermore throughout the rest of our lives in touch with God, if we're doing what we're supposed to. And so we can trust Him with whatever life brings us, even the most fearful, imaginable situations that maybe we as Al-Anons and our crazy thinking could never even conjure up. Because life, again, does happen. And we just learn that God is in control. And we turn the outcome over. And so that's kind of the gist of the fear inventory. It's very powerful. Again, your sponsor will walk through it as we get to step 5. And so I'm going to just speak on the sex conduct inventory. It says on page 69, in this way, we try to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relation to the test. Was it selfish or not? We asked God to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed. So we have to cover this. We do this briefly because, again, as it says, it's a God-given power that we often misuse. And whether we realize we're misusing it or not, we do. So we take a quick inventory of our past sex conduct, which, the review of it comes briefly in step 5 with our sponsor. So these 3 areas or these 3 inventories are what we complete during step 4. And again, most of this is like something none of us have ever even thought about doing. And so we're going to learn in step 5 here in a moment why we do this, the power behind it. So that pretty much sums up step 4. I'm going to move forward to step 5, which reads, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. Let's flip over to page 72. 72. And this is going to cover step 5. So after having completed step 5, we come together with our sponsor. Step 4, we come together with our sponsor for step 5. And on page 72, I just want to get my page flipped there. Okay, so this is the second full paragraph. It reads, this is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects with another person. We think we have done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. There is doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. Many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We will be more reconciled to discussing ourselves with another person when we see good reasons why we should do so. The best reason first, if we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. So this is how we're starting to learn why this is different. This is different than anything we've ever done before. When we're doing when we're doing therapy, with someone regarding our alcoholic loved one. That's a human aid solution, right? This person knows a tiny bit of your story. And even if you do some sort of an inventory, which in my personal experience never did anything like that in any of the years that I did therapy. So again, the experience doesn't even come close to what we do here. And again, it's someone who knows one part or small parts, because we don't dive into it and we're not as detailed. It's a different perspective. It's truly a different perspective. And it's almost hard to put into words other than to say it's a different perspective and a different experience. Because a lot of us have done therapy. We can all relate to kind of what that experience is like. So if you're new and you've never done an inventory sheet, step 4, as directed, through the big book, it's something I personally, and I know other fellows have never done before, right? This is something new. Okay, and so if we're doing a self-help workbook, same type of thing. And it reads literally right here. It says, where is it? Okay. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient, because even if we're part of like a accountability group of some sort, which again was never my experience. Anytime I was trying to fix my problem, my crazy thinking, my issues around the Al-Anon, and honestly, I don't know if I ever even did self-help books. We're beyond that usually in our thinking. We're just so set in our ways that we know that we're right. Hardly ever are we going to do something like a self-help book, but it's not impossible. Some people may have. But again, it's a self-appraisal, and it's not enough, because after we sit and read that, the thoughts and the feelings that come with it may stick for a short while if we're lucky. But then our crazy thinking starts all over again, and we find ourselves back into managing and controlling the alcoholic. And we're just like, oh, well, let me go back and reread my self-appraisal in my self-help book. Rarely, hardly. And that is why I'm going to keep reading here. It reads, this is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects with another person. Okay, sorry, that's actually a repeat. Let me pick up right here. Okay, so time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they have turned to easier methods. Almost invariably, they got drunk. So that's what I was speaking about before. Almost invariably, that crazy thinking starts over for us Al-Anons. Having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. We think the reason is that they never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves. But they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense we find it necessary until they told someone else all their life story. So that might seem intimidating, right? Someone who's new. I certainly remember reading that. We have readings that come along with completing our inventories and getting ready for step 5. And to know that I was going to have to be completely honest and vulnerable with somebody was slightly terrifying. I say slightly because I kept coming back to that, remembering that I had chosen to take step 3 and I was ready for something different. I reminded myself what life was like before and how I did not want to go back to that way of living. And my sponsor, who was willing to work the steps with me and take me through the steps, had recovered. And they were like me, right? They understood my way of thinking. which is really important. Well, they talk about in the book taking, these steps with an understanding person, someone who gets it. That's why we help others, because we understand that mind. We have the same mind. We've been through it before, essentially, in our own version. And so, we have to remember why we chose to do this and trust that this person has our best interests, and that they're willing to share a gift that they've been given, if we're willing to do the work. So let's keep reading here. It reads on page 73. More than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He is very much the actor. The outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. So, again, we are not able to be fully honest with ourselves. We can say a lot of things and be honest in some areas, but we always come back to justification or reasoning or but if, or only if. And we can't change that. That's how we're made. That's how we, some of us have had this, mind, this crazy thinking most of our lives. Some of us progress into this illness as adults. It doesn't really matter. The illness is progressive, and once we're at that point, we're never going to recover. And so most of our thinking is centered around this craziness. And we, again, have to be ready for a spiritual solution, something that we've never tried before. And again, as it reads, it's hard for us because we want to believe that we want to show the world that we really are good people. But previously on, page 73, it said, we have not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty until we take this step in step 5 and, really have the opportunity to do that, to be honest and fearless and experience humility with the help of our recovered sponsor. So we take that time with our sponsor in step 5 to go over these inventories that we have completed. And at the end of, the fearless and thorough, covering of everything, we get to have an hour to ourselves and with God. And it reads on page 75, this is the end of step 5 here. It says, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we have done. And it's a very powerful hour to sit with this new perspective and to have walked through this experience of doing something we've never done before, having things put into perspective, the facts, right? Having those highlighted for us by our sponsor with their help, and truly recognizing and understanding that, we have to be ready for this new way of thinking and this new solution. We're no longer in control. If we want to continue doing that, we're going to just end up right where we were again. That hour is very powerful. It's very important. You don't skip it. We follow the directions as they're laid out in the book. And by the conclusion, we check in with our sponsor and, after step 6 here. So I'm going to move on to step 6. Let me check time. Yeah, we're doing pretty good on time. So step 6, we're going to skip ahead to page 76 to cover some things in step 6. And step 6 reads, we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. So everything we covered in step 5, at the completion of our hour, we are ready to move forward with step 6. And that is that we've recognized this new perspective. We've recognized where we've been wronged. We recognize the fact. And our sponsor helps us see where we were wrong, where we were letting fear creep in, where we were being selfish, where we were still holding on to resentment when we shouldn't be. And we have to be ready for God to take it all away. In order to move forward, and we have to do the house cleaning and take care of everything in the past. So this is kind of that next step towards doing that. We're going to learn in the next few steps, those we have wronged and those we've stayed resentful for, we have to do something about that. So I won't skip ahead, but in order to even be ready to recognize that, we have to be ready for God to remove all these defects that have consumed us in the past. And so on page 76, it reads, we have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all of these things which we had admitted are objectionable? Can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go of, we ask God to help us be willing. So I do believe I touched on this a bit last week. The willingness piece, right? The willingness is something the founders, that word is used a lot. And we're not perfect people. Nobody's perfect. This is literally a program of progress and not perfection. So, but willingness is the key to progress, right? So there are going to be things that we have a harder time letting go of, that's harder than others. And if we have that willingness piece, the desire and the literally just, the motivation to just keep an open mind, just to be willing to give God time and open our hearts to whether it's forgiveness or letting go of a resentment. A lot of them are a lot easier to do that because we are, we're like, I'm ready to let go. But some are harder. And, the founders want to emphasize that we just have to be willingness, open-minded, right? Having the ability to not cling to something. And if we can do that, we can pray and it will come. It almost, in my personal experience, again, I'll kind of sprinkle in a little personal story here. There were several, and honestly, some of them, for me, took years or had taken years to let go of. But they aren't as strong. Maybe that's the right word. The desire to hang on is less and less, and I don't have the crazy thinking, or at least as much, right? Because after completing all the steps, we have the tools. So a lot of these sort of carry on from past into future, and everyone's story is unique. So I think there might be a common misconception, at least there was for me in the beginning, that once I kind of made that, like everything was just supposed to go away. And at the heart of it, like it's softer, if that makes sense. Like the resentment is not as hard in my heart, if there are some that are still, being hung on from the past. It's so much easier to move on and live kind of in harmony. And, obviously the new things that come up, which we'll get into with, the steps in the next couple weeks, as we learn how to deal with things that happen in the future. So again, these are all just things that we're speaking about from the past. And, so in my personal experience, it may be the same for some and it may not be for others. Working the program truly softens even the ones that we want to cling to. It's so beautiful. It really is. Like, there's just no words. It truly is like this experience that it's hard to put into words. So forgive me if I'm not doing a well enough job. But I think the best way to do it is, or to say it is, it truly softens even those hard things that we want to cling to. We learn we're able to live in harmony still, even if we want to hold on to certain things. And eventually, as time moves on, we learn to let go. So I hope that makes sense. Thanks for letting me share that little kind of personal experience. And again, they just want to emphasize willingness. So we don't have to have it all figured out after step 6. We don't have to be like, whoa, I just feel completely 100% free. No, this takes time, and willingness is key. I'll end with that. Okay. I think that covers, that takes us through step 6 here. So give me 1 second. I'm a few minutes ahead of time here. So let me see if I will just do a quick little recap of steps 4 through 7. So we covered step 4 was step 4 made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. So literally pen to paper, we're going to write down everything from our past and cover, resentment, fears, sex conduct, and that's, actions. We're going to write it out. We're not going to think about it. We're not going to, play it over in our minds or just, say I'll take mental notes. We literally write it all out. We're fearless and thorough. And then moving on to step 5 is when we come together with our sponsor and we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, our sponsor, the exact nature of our wrongs. So we fearlessly and thoroughly again, cover our entire inventory that we've written. And then after we've completed that, which can take, some time, we're fearless and thorough, we are ready to take step 6. So we return home, we have our hour, and when we're ready, at the end of our hour, step 6 is we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Everything we've covered, everything our sponsor has helped us to see. In step 5, we are ready to have God remove these defects. And again, willingness is the key phrase there. So that covers our steps for this evening, 4 through 6. I'm going to go ahead and start the closing of this meeting. So our 7th tradition, every group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. This group does not have a payment structure in place and currently requires no overhead expenses. So if you would like to fulfill tradition 7, please direct contributions directly to the Al-Anon World Service Office by visiting al-anon.org. It's al-anon.org. For questions about this meeting, or if you are looking for a sponsor, please send email to, I don't know why it's not listed here, sorry. I think it's just not on my printed copy. My apologies, give me just 1 second. Okay, yep, here it is, sorry. It's Al-Anon Big Book Recovery at gmail.com. So it's all one word big together there. It's Al-Anon Big Book Recovery at gmail.com. Recordings can be accessed on YouTube by searching at Al-Anon Step Speaker in the YouTube search box. So again, it's at Al-Anon Step Speaker. That's all you have to type in the YouTube search box, and our YouTube recording, our page will pop up at Al-Anon Step Speaker. If you are interested in any other Al-Anon meetings that follow the Big Book, please visit www.alanonbigbooksolutiongroup.org. Again, that's www.alanonbigbooksolutiongroup.org. Okay, I'm going to be reading from the Big Book on page 164. It reads, "Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order, but you obviously cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and for countless others. This is the great fact for us. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then." Now, let's have a moment of silence for the Al-Anon who still suffers, followed by the Lord's Prayer, or a prayer of your own choosing, said in silence. Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.